Hello, this is Panda Consulting's ArcGIS workshop. I'm Frank Conkling. This time, what we're going to do is we're going to look at mapping and maintaining subdivisions in the parcel fabric. We're going to look a little bit deeper at some of the decisions that have to be made while you're doing this, some of the insights and why you do certain things one way versus the other way. Um, so please stick around. During it, we're going to give you some tips. But please, thank you for watching this. First thing, just to let you know, on the lower right corner, you'll see a QR code that will take you to our website where you'll find out who we are, what we do, why we do it. And please go ahead and sign up for our monthly newsletter. We're actually thinking of expanding that a little bit more and including articles and blog posts in there. So please go ahead and do that. Also, you can go and send us ideas on new topics that you want us to talk about. All right, let's go ahead and start. Okay. So here overall, these are the topics that we're going to talk about. We're going to start with general workflow on here. The first one's going to be mapping the subdivision boundary, or what's often called the simultaneous conveyance in the old local government information model. Then we're going to talk about aligning data, and that's the first area where people really have a problem. How do I do this? What do I do? What approaches and how do I think through it? And then once we're done with that, then we're going to look at mapping the individual lots, or an LGIM, they used to call those conveyance divisions. And then as we're going along, we'll try to give you some tips and tricks on what to do. So to begin, the workflow, creating the subdivision boundary. There's some major or pseudo steps that you do. The first thing you'll do is you'll go and you'll create the record. Everything in the parcel fabric is related to a record. So the first thing you want to do is you want to go and create that, populate it. Then you want to input the subdivision boundary using the traverse tool. I'm going to add some things to it just so you understand why. Then you close the traverse, you create the seed, and then you build the subdivision. Then the real adventure starts. So let's start with this. I have here a client's data, and on this data, I've actually gone and geo-referenced a subdivision plat. This is a tiny one. This is actually located in Wisconsin. This is called a small or a certified survey map, which is a subdivision of less than four parcels, four lots in there. So I've already gone and geo-referenced this just so we can start, but I want to go and have something so you can read along with me as I'm going through this. So first thing we do is first make sure we are editing. Then we want to go and create a record. This record, we're going to go and just tell it, this is, in this case, CSM 011972. The record type, this is what type of record. In this case, we can make it a CSM. This can also be a drop down. We're not going to do a bunch of this. By the way, it's all optional on here. Recorded date, the counts, retire counts, those all are created for you. So I have now a record. Now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to start going and inputting using the traverse tool, the elements of here. So this is one of the things that's interesting is that with the newer versions of ArcGIS Pro, you get the project default distance unit does not match the COGO unit's distance. What does that mean? Well, let's look at that, and that right now, the project default units, if I go and look at the properties of here and look at the projection on here, this is in fact on Harn feet, USA feet on here. If I go to the overall units under my options, I see here that my distances are actually set not to US feet, they're set to international foot. So I want to make sure that I go and have those match. If they don't match, you're going to see that warning. That's what it means. It means that the default setting for the types of linear units that you're making does not match what the overall project units are set to on here. So just go ahead and set that and you'll be fine from that point forward. Then I'm going to start by saying I'm going to put in simultaneous conveyance lines or subdivision lines on here. All right. And I'm going to look to my point of beginning. And if I go in here, I can see on this georeference plat that this point right here is the point of beginning. So I'm going to set that as the point of beginning of my traverse. Now, before I start, I'm actually going to do something above and beyond what is normal, what should be normal, in that I'm going to go and set the ground to grid on here. This is pretty good data that we have, but the ground to grid allows us to go and implement the basis of bearings if there's any differences between what the plat says and what the actual data has. And that can be caused by the fact that maybe there's ground bearings or ground directions versus grid directions. So in order to do that down here, we are going to say enter the ground line, and we're going to tell it what the bearing is on this first line. And this is 04 degrees, 23 minutes, 04 seconds, and that's southwest. Now note, as soon as I input a qualified bearing here, it allows me to go and say, okay, well, show us where that line is. Now on here, I'm actually just going and selecting that line. And what that does is it actually goes and tells us whether or not there is a rotation on here. And we're looking here and we can see that this is in fact 0 degrees, 7 minutes, 22 seconds is going to be the rotation that's applied to every one of these lines so that the bearings match what's actually the bearings that we input are going to go and be drawn so that they match and are coincident with that line. So let's start. 4.2304, and that's southwest, and I can hit enter. My distance, again, is 240, 259.88. By the way, I am doing this live. I have no problem showing you live on here. I'm going to make mistakes, some on purpose, some not on purpose, but there is my first line, and in fact, it should line up. My next one is 00, 5345 southwest for 48.46 feet on here. Then, so that puts me to here. Now I've got a curve and I need to go and look at what that curve information is. Turns out the curve information is on a curve table right up here. This curve information that I have, oh, let me go back here. This curve information, by the way, it's going to keep jumping because I have set on here auto pan. I'm going to turn that off. So this, I'm now going to go and take this information and input it into my curve so that I'm doing it. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use the chord bearing in here, 40 degrees, 43 minutes, 57 seconds, and that's northwest, so that's 4. Before I hit enter, I'm going to tell it that this is going to be my chord bearing, my CB. Doesn't matter whether it's capitalized or not, that's going to be my chord bearing. I'm going to hit enter. For a curve, the distance field is always 0. Now, the first thing I'm going to put in is the radius. My radius is 116.00, but if I look back to here, I will find that this curve is actually a curve. It's called to the left, meaning as we are going and traversing along the curve, the radius point exists on the left of the curve versus on the right of the curve. And what
Frank,
this, yes,
just to cut you off for a moment, there's a good
okay,
question in the chat. Does it matter if there's a space or not between the 4 and the chord bearing, the CB?
no, no, it does not matter on there. It will go and automatically, you'll see as it goes and it takes that that direction or that bearing information, it automatically parses that and then uses the CB and you'll see what's actually stored on here. There's a space automatically put in there. So you don't have to put the space in there. All right. Just to go and it's a good question. But yeah, the answer is no, you don't have to do that. It's automatically parsing those out as you're going through. All right. So this radius is going to be a negative radius on here. So because this is going to be to the left, positive radius means that the radius point is to the right of the line. And this defines whether or not how this curve is concave, whether it's concave to the west or concave to the right. Let's go back up here to the curve table and put some more information in here. This next thing, what do I put after that? Oftentimes people will say, how do I choose what I'm going to put in here? And I'm going to give you my guide to this as a surveyor and recognize I'm going to actually draw something here. I'm going to say, okay, here's the tip. If in fact the radius for that curve is fairly long, meaning the radius is more than 500 feet, all right, I would put the central angle in, the delta angle in here. If it's a shorter radius, less than 500 feet, less than 500, you can put in either the arc length, the arc length, or you can put in the chord bearing or the chord distance on here. And the reason you do that is because of the way that the trigonometric functions work. If in fact you have a rounded issue here, it's going to go and cause less problems here. Excuse me. If you have a rounded issue here, which is, by the way, the the arc length, and the chord distance are all rounded. They're rounded to the closest hundredth. If you get a rounding here, it's going to cause a bigger problem than if you are rounding in here. So on the longer radius, put the delta angle. On the shorter radiuses, you can use, actually, I said that backwards, didn't I? The shorter radiuses inside of a subdivision always use the delta angle. The longer ones always use the arc length or the chord. Again, inside of a subdivision with shorter curves, use the delta angle. Inside, or if you have a long radius, use the arc length or the chord distance. All right. Hopefully I didn't confuse too many people there. So this is a shorter radius, less than 500 feet. So I'm going to go and input the delta angle, and this is going to be 83 degrees, 32 minutes, 17 seconds, and I'm going to use D as the shortcut for it. And I'm going to hit enter. Now, if I go back here to my traverse and I tell it again to go in auto pan, um, it's just good. Okay, so we've got that. And if I go and just tell it to go and show me only my current one and turn off this georeference, you'll see that's exactly where it is. Let's go and turn this and this off and this off and this off and show only the curve on here. Let's actually, I'm putting in these lines. There we go. There it is there. All right, let's turn this back on. Let's continue with this. So now we're here and we're going to go and input the next thing on here. So here's the next element that we want to look at as we're going through. And again, a lot of this is a recognition that there's rounding going on all of this information that's shown on the subdivision or the survey. They are rounding it to the closest hundredth. They are rounding the bearings to the closest second. So the first thing we want to do is look and see, does this match what's shown on here? And it does not. So it may be that this was not supposed to be a tangent curve. So we're going to go in and make sure that we input the correct bearing here on this. So this is now going to be 82.3006, and that's northwest. And our distance here is 307.66 feet. All right, it's going to take us to here. We're now going to go and continue on. Our next line, our next course is 4 degrees, 24 minutes, 41 seconds, northeast for 204.58 feet. It's going to pan us over to here. Our next course is now going to be 82 degrees, 33 minutes, 25 seconds, northwest for 375.82 feet. All right, 375. Got an extra one in there. All right, that'll take us there. 375.82. All right, our next one is 1 degree, 15 minutes, 36 seconds, northwest. And our distance is 400.52 feet. All right. The next one over here is 88.4402, and that's northeast. For 8042 for 620.39 feet. All right. And we're going to see, there's some variation coming in here. Now we're going to go and do the next line here, which is, in this case, 00.2347, and that is southeast. And the distance is 494.47 feet. All right, it takes us to here. And then finally, 82 degrees, 33 minutes, 25 seconds, southeast for 170.00 feet. And we come down to our closure. All right, so right now, the traverse has been set with an option to close within 1 feet, 1 foot, and it's telling us, oh, you've got some issues here. So we would look at the closure component on here. Without getting into too much issues here, what the closure tab is going to do is tell us if in fact there's huge variations on here where we might have some sort of problem. And by the way, the options for closure are the snap the last line to the closure. Rarely would I use that. The compass rule is a combination. It's an old surveying term. It's a combination of using the amount of errors that are intrinsic in the directions and the amount of errors which are intrinsic in the distances. All right. Otherwise, the transit rule is the distances, the crandall is the bearing or the directions or the angles that are turned. The compass rule does both, and it gives us the clearest example of what could be wrong in here. And what I want to do is I want to look at the adjusted values column and see, well, what are these adjusted values and the residual values? These are how much they were all adjusted. And it looks like not one line was adjusted more than any others, not one area. So it seems like this is inherent in the information that's stored in the rounding on here. If I were to look at this and explore more, I would say it might be down here that this information shown for this curve, because I saw that there was an angle difference between coming out of the curve when I input it using the curve information on here. And so I would start looking in there if I were to go to chase it down. For this exercise, I'm not going to chase it down. I'm just going to say, that's good. We're fine here. All right. And I'm done with that traverse on here so I can get off there. The next step is to create the seed. And if you saw me just go and input that seed on here, it created the beginning of a polygon. All right. And this seed, if I go and select that seed, just to prove it to you, I can look in here, and this is the beginning of the polygon. If I look at the actual size of it, it's a 34 square foot circle is what it is. If I were to zoom in enough, I'd see it's a 34 foot square, or not square, a circle in here that it makes just as a temporary holding to show us that our lines are going to form a closed polygon within there. The other thing we want to look at is on this attribute field called is seed on that polygon, it says, yes, it's a seed, which means when we go to do the next step, which is build this component on here, it's going to take that polygon that's marked as a seed and expand it until it meets these lines on here. All right. So before we go any further, let's go in and explore one more thing on here. Let's go and label these. The question I often have is that, well, if I'm going to go and have a problem here, if I'm going to go and look at this, why would I go and not split these lines up as I'm building the polygon boundary? Why go and build the overall big lines on them? And it turns out that it has to do with from a, a, a correction standpoint. If you have a correction to go and perform, it's better performed on larger lines. Also, the fact that with the assumption that every one of these lines is rounded to the closest hundredth, so that rather than having this rounding error and this rounding error, we only get one rounding error. Same way here, we only have one rounding error versus the two here. So from a surveying standpoint, from a elimination of rounding errors on here, you want to try to minimize the number of rounding errors which are introduced into your information. So build the large lines, and once they're built and complete, then we're going to go back and split them up and divide them up for the smaller components on here. All right, that's the next tip. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go build this. And it's going to go and build it, and it's going to go and show me where this thing is. Now here is the next decision point. Went all the way through here. The next decision point is, okay, what do we do now? How do we figure out what we do with this? And how do we handle the alignment? How do we decide? Okay, so here's going to be my tips, is that A, we have good information here. This is probably better than everything else we have. But it might be sometimes that you are confident in your existing information and you want to go and adjust this so that the new fits into the old versus the old fitting into the new. By the way, that's using this align parcels tool, which is going to take whatever we have selected, and whatever is selected will get adjusted to fit into what else is around it. So here's my rule of thumb. If I'm going to fit and adjust the new to match the old, rather than going and doing an alignment now, I'm going to go and build everything out because that way they all will get adjusted. Because what will happen is it will go and take this polygon and the lines and shrink them so that, or expand them so they'll fit into the old. So it's going to warp them. And then I'm going to go back and try to split this thing up, and I'm going to use those warped lines, and they're not going to close. So it's going to give me false readings on here. But if I'm going to go and instead adjust the old to the new, I can do it now. Or I can just say, okay, well, I'm going to do this smarter from this point forward. I'm just going to go and build everything before I even look at adjusting things. So my recommendation is when you're building a subdivision, build a subdivision, then go and continue on the same record building the lots and splitting those up. And before you do any adjustments on here, complete this thing, make sure it closes internally within itself, and then go from there. So I'm not going to line now. I'm going to go and just build this thing from this point forward. So thank you, Gary. So let's go and look at what is the process of doing that. All right. So then what we're going to do is we're going to go and map the lots in here. We're going to let's reuse the record. Some of my clients say, well, let's have a new record for the lots inside that subdivision. And that's fine. But that's sort of extra. You really don't need to create a new record. You want this all to reflect the document, the plat, so that my recommendation is from a logical standpoint, use the same record. You don't need a new one. And then what you're going to do is you're going to select the recently created subdivision parcel, just the parcel, not the lines. Then you're going to go and say, copy lines two. And you go to copy them from the subdivision layer into the lot layer. Then you're going to use divide and traverse tools and input those lines, create the seeds, build the lots, use sequential numbering for attribution, and then check for gaps and overlaps and build it. So let's do this. All right. So I have the same record on here, and I'm going to go and select this. I have my currently built record on here. So I'm going to say, just show me only my current active record on here. All right. And now I'm going to go and take this polygon and I'm going to do copy lines too. And I'm going to build them. Oh, I need to go and turn this on, don't I? So let's go over here and make sure copy lines two will only show you what you have turned on and available to work with. So now I'm going to do copy lines two. I'm going to go in here and say, let's do it to the conveyance division, still maintaining only my current active record and just preserve those. All right. So now what we've done is it's gone and copied every one of those lines over for us on here. Now here's the other tip. Here's the next tip. If I go in here right now and do a selection, it's going to select my SIMCON line, my simultaneous conveyance lines that I just built, and my simultaneous Polygon because they're part of the same current record. So here's the tip. Just go in here when you're getting ready to build the conveyance divisions, turn off the simultaneous conveyance. All you have on now are your conveyance division lines. All right. So there you've got all this. Now let's turn on this plat again and let's do the rest of this work in here. So let's take this line here, all right, and we're going to go and divide that line up. Now with divide, we can go and tell it that we want to go and divide it by distances. And we have options. We have a single distance on here, all right? And often some of my clients say, well, that's easy. We could just we'll figure out whether it's from the start or the back. We'll put that in and it'll do that. And it'll split it. The problem is in the parcel fabric, it will mark the line that we input as being entered, but the other line will be marked as being computed. We want them both to be marked as entered. So we will go and use this option, which is varying distances. To answer your question over in the chat window, yes, the old arc map construct from parent is gone. It now is called copy lines two. Same function. It's just been renamed from construct from parent into copy the lines that's associated with this polygon or this parcel into the new lines. Same function, does the same thing, but it's just called copy lines two now. All right. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here and I'm going to split this up and I'm going to input and I'm going to start with the 396.90 feet, enter. And by the way, while I'm doing this is to tell me what the overall distance is, what I have input, the sum of what I've input so far and what I have left. So then I'm going to put 233.49 in there. All right. And there's 49. And it says, oh, you've got 1/10 of a foot difference in here. There's rounding errors. I'm going to delete this. And then I'm going to tell it to go ahead and take that difference there and just prorate it on here. All right. So it's 930.39. All right. 36.90. 233.49. Oh, look at that. This adds up to not 620.39. This adds up to 620.49. Oh, it does 39 on there. So there's some an issue there somehow. And just to make sure I,
Frank,
yes,
it was a
two,
typo.
two to
It's
three. Yep, that's
yeah.
I see it now.
Mark called it out.
Yep, Mark, keep me clean. All right, keep me clean. So it is zero. So yeah, you want to look at that. But I'm going to go and tell it just distribute these equally. Go ahead and do that, and it goes and creates them. If I go in here and look at those lines, again, here's my bearing, here's my distance, and in fact, each of these are now marked as being entered. Now, if you've not moved to the parcel fabric, in the parcel fabric, we have a new attribute field called Kogo type. And that Kogo type allows us to go and store where did this Kogo value come from? The old ArcMap parcel fabric, everything had Kogo values, but you never could tell what the derivation of it was. Where did that come from? Was it in fact entered by the mapper, which means that's a good Kogo value? Or was it inversed from geometry, meaning oh, that's digitized. You can't rely upon that. Or is it computed? Is it in fact something that's been clipped or divided or something else? And again, because if we had used divided and just told it a half or something, it would have been all computed. So, but since I entered them both in there, it's marked as being entered. So again, one of the real advantages of the new parcel fabric is the fact that it will tell you not just the cocoa values, but where they came from. All right, let's move on to the next one. And let's go through here. And in fact, we have a split in here. It's interesting in that there's not an angle in this line. There's not a lot coming in here. It looks like this is just trying to tell us that there's a point there. Now, what that corner is, it doesn't even call out on the survey what that point is, but there is a point there. Let's go ahead and divide it anyway, even though it might not be necessary. So we'll go to our division. We have the old values in here. We want to go and clean those out. Quick tip. In order to clean this out, just click on this first one, cleans it out. Let's go to the second one. We now are fully clean now. So now 189.86 feet. All right. And then our next one is 304.61 feet on here. And it will tell us 0. I'm not hitting enter only because I know the values are in there. And I'm going to go ahead and say divide. All right. That's now been divided out. And that's reflective of that. So on here, let's take this line here. This is the next one to be divided. Again, clean it out, put it in place now. We're coming from the start line again. So our first distance is 63.39, then 178.17, and then the final distance is 66.10. I'll put that in. It comes to 0. Let's say divide this. All right, no division here that we need to input, no division here, so we're good with that. Let's go and turn this off, turn the geoprocessing off so we can see these. Let's also go and label these so that we can see these dimensions on here as we're going forth. All right, do a couple quick tips on using the divide tool and such, and just that's sort of the best and most efficient way to go and do this. Let's go and build the lines now that we're missing on here. All right, so let's turn on our georeference plat again. So let's build it. We have a line that goes from here to here, up to here. Let's go and use the traverse and build that. And when we're looking, we're going to do a conveyance division line, and we're going to start it at that point there. Here's the tip. Now, when we're going to go and do this, let's go ahead and set the closing line. Let's set our closing point here on that one. All right, so we've got the starting and the closing. So this way it will automatically close it if it's within a foot. Now let's go ahead and start typing our first line. Our first line is 4 degrees, 24 minutes, 41 seconds, and that's northeast. And that is for 204.65 feet. All right, our next line is 6 degrees, 08 minutes, 31 seconds, northwest, and the distance there is 469.86 1 4 feet. And in fact, it says it's closed. But if I look again, we have this 1300ths of a foot difference. So let me tell you why I recommend this approach where you put the start and the closing point in here when you're inputting these lines. Because of this right here, we have a difference in here because of it. Again, I'm not sure what the quality of this survey is or anything, but I'm just telling you there's issues in here. But by inputting the start point and the closing point of these lines, I can be sure that it's going to snap and it's going to close, which is critical for the parcel fabric. There's nothing worse than inputting that line and having it be 1300ths away from where it should be. And then when I go to build the seeds, they don't create. And I have to go and search. And why did that not create? All right. So you're going to see me doing this a lot. I go ahead and doing that. So now let's go and do a new line. All right, this new line, we're going to set our start point as being that point there, and our closing point is going to be that point there. Again, highly recommend it. When you're building lot lines inside of here, you always put the start and the closing point in to make sure that it snaps for the parcel fabric creation of seeds. All right, so we're now 4 degrees, 24 minutes, 41 seconds, and that says southwest. We're going to call that an inversing it northeast. Maybe I should have had different start and closing. And the distance is 204.82 feet. There it is. And there's a misclosure distance there. All right. New line. This is the next line here that I'm inputting here. Let me go and show you a different technique. Another tip on inputting these lines in here. So in this case, I have to snap here to here. Well, I can actually just use a create line here and do that. However, I want to be careful with that because I want to make sure from my Kogo, I want to make sure that it stores the correct information on here. So I'm going to turn my plat on again so we can see this. And this is going to be southeast. So it's going to go from this point to this point. So here's another technique. I can tell it here what my attribute values are going to be for this line, southeast. All right. And my distance is going to be 178.16 feet. And then my Kogo type is going to be entered. Now, when I go to do this, I can snap here, I can snap here, and if I look at the attributes, it's automatically attributed for me. So not just going and typing in that line, all right, typing in the line or creating a line by snapping to those points, but using the extra options inside of Create over here, in which let's go back here. On my template, I have this line, this options here. These are things that a lot of people don't even recognize are there, but I can go in here and I can attribute the things and it's going to copy that over and over and over while I'm inputting things here. These options also go with whether or not we want to rubber band this. So for example, we're going to create some lines I really don't need. I'm going to go and say, no, let's start that. But I'm going to use this same thing where I'm going to have these lines are going to be attributed the exact same way. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to create a bunch of lines. Let's say I had already created this and already created this, and I wanted to snap a bunch of lines in here and they all had the same bearing and distance. Well, if I populate that line first and tell it, don't rubber band, well, now when I go in here and do this, I can snap to the points, snap to the points, snap to the points, snap to the points, all of them, all of them will be attributed exactly the same way. They'll automatically be pre-attributed for me, and I don't have to run update Cocoa on them. So as I'm going through and building this, you just want to make sure that you think about and using all the options inside ArcGIS Pro and the Parcel Fabric to make yourselves as efficient as possible when you're building this. All right, let's go ahead and delete those lines. Those were just excess. I wanted to show you just that other technique, that other trick in here. All right, so I have now got my lines in here. I've got everything in here. This seed was the seed from my um, simultaneous conveyance type. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create the seeds. There's all my seeds. All right, and I can go and build this. And it went and built it all out for me. So if I look at this, here's my 4 lots. If I look at my workflow, what I've done is I've gone through all of this to here. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use sequential numbering for attribution. In this case, there's only 4 of them, but let's go in and say there's 1, 2, 3, and then this is outlot here. Let's use sequential numbering, even though it is sort of extraneous here. So let's go back to modify and go to our sequential numbering tool, which is under the attributes, and tell it that what we're going to do is we're going to sequentially number our conveyance divisions. And it's going to be numbered in the name field. And we're going to use a single number. Now this formatting, this is really the trick to using sequential numbering. It's learning how to do this formatting. And what happens is every time there's a pound sign, that's what's going to get filled in. So if we are looking to just put a single number between 1 and 10, we can put that in. If, however, our number is supposed to be 2 characters long or 3 characters long, and we're wanting to fill it in something, we might put extra pound signs in there. All right. So this allows us to format how many lines are going to be in here. If we see here on that bottom example, it has 3 pound signs. It means that the numbers that we're sequencing are going to be padded with zeros in front of it. It also shows that we can put characters before. We can actually put characters afterwards. In this case, we're not going to do it, but we're just going to show, okay, that's how we do it. So learning to use this format tab, that format option here, really is helpful with sequential numbering, and that really brings it so that you're as effective as possible. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put, what is the start number? My starting number is 1. I'm sequencing by 1. Now here's the secret on here, that it's going to go and number everything that you go through, everything that you sort of run your selection through when we do this. So in this case, I can go here, and even here, this is still 1, to here, to here, and it will go and sequence it. And if we actually turn this off, we can see this is 1, 2, 3. We didn't go through here, so this one hasn't been numbered. But in this way, you can go and do a certain block, stop, move over to a different block, or skip something, move to a different area, and continue numbering there for you. So just recognize that you want to learn how the sequence numbering works, and then sort of learn all the sort of nuances on what to do on there. All right. One more thing we want to do, we want to go and call this outlot. So we're going to go and go to here and call this outlot 1.
Frank, we also have a question from Heather in the chat. Can
Yes.
you please explain again how to turn off rubber banding when creating 2-point lines?
Oh, yeah, it's actually it's really interesting. There's a couple of places in here. When I'm doing 2-point lines, and let's go back to where we just see the feature templates. In this feature template, all right, if we go over to the actual options here, this opens up the active template. And this gives us, we can go and put attribution in, or here we can go and tell it whether or not to continue the 2-point lines. Now, by default, our feature template says continue. And let me go and show you that. So let's go back here to our templates. And it turns out that up here we have manage templates, which is the way that you manage the way your features are created. This is sort of the modification of the options you have. And on the lines features, we have properties. And those properties Come on. Let's go and close that up and let's create a different one here. Let's just go to conveyance division lines properties here. All right, we have a couple things. Here's the general, here's what it's called. Here's the attributes, whether or not there's any attributes automatically stored. These are the default attributes for this, by the way. And then under tools, we have what is the default tool? And then down here, whether or not continue 2-point lines is set as your default. This is how it starts. If you set this as being the default inside that feature template, every time you open up the feature template, it will be set to that. If, however, it's just a temporary thing where you've got it set as a default and you want it to overwrite that temporary default, you click on the line here and say, don't do that every time. Now, again, kind of want to recognize how you work. There are certain lines that should be continued, other lines that probably should not be continued. By default, most 2-point lines, if we're doing traverses, they'll probably be continued. So that's how you do it. Thanks, Heather. And again, hopefully I gave you a little bit more to think about. All right, so now we're basically done with this. So let's go and turn on our conveyance division again. We still haven't made this thing fit. All right. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to say select out of here. I can say all the records, but I know that align parcels only works with the polygons. So I'm going to be smart, especially if I'm in an enterprise environment. I'm going to say just select all the polygons in here. And it selects all the polygons in here that I created as part of my active record. Now I'm going to say, okay, now let's align everything. And it's at this point that I say, all right, so what do I want to align? How do I want to align it to? And I can, if I leave my current selection on here, it's going to adjust what I just created and make it fit against the existing. If I toggle it and say no, do everything else, it's going to take the old things and adjust them to fit to the new things. All right. In this case, let's do the old to the new. So now the next thing we have to do is we have to go and look at this. Well, it turns out that these aren't the same in here, and this is off quite a bit. So the first thing I have to do is I have to go and set my tolerance to at least be big enough so that it includes these elements in here. Turns out that this is more than 10. So I put it at 15. So now I want to go through real quickly, just make sure. Okay, it looks like 15 will work. It's the first thing I want to do. And by the way, this is actually two different tools. This right here, this is the transform tool in ArcGIS Pro. And then this here, this is a line features tool. So it's a combination of these two. The first thing it's going to do is this transform tool is going to look at points and say, I'm going to take and see if there's a point inside my tolerance. And if there is, I'm going to try to find that closest point, and I will adjust the things that are selected to the point that's not selected. All right. So it's going to generate that. And then once it does that, then it's going to say, okay, now I'm going to look at the lines and whether there's intermediate points along those lines. And if there are, and if they're within a certain tolerance here, I'm going to snap those. Well, I'm going to tell you that by default, I usually say I recommend that instead of using one assumes that these lines on both sides are straight and they're going to be next to one another. I often will use about half of whatever my tolerance for the points are. All right. So in this case, let's just use 10. And then once I've got that set, I'll go and say generate on here. Now, let's go and get this drawing out. Now, when I do generate, I have my show preview set up. So it's automatically going to give me a preview of how much and how it's going to adjust things. And it's adjusting, in this case, this old information to the new information. I probably should have had this turned on too, but we'll see what happens. All right. So it's going to adjust that old to the new on here and align that. So let's go ahead and click align in here and let it move everything to where it should be and then get off of this. All right. Let's go ahead and clear this out. So now all of the old information has been adjusted over to the new information on here. Any questions in here, Chris, before I move on? I think
None
we're
at the
good.
moment.
Okay. So the next thing we have left,
Oh, we do have
oh,
one question.
okay.
Will this create a historic showing how it looked before it moved? That's a good question.
No, I haven't done a clip yet, have I? The things that will create historic are when I do a clip, all right, because that's going to go and take and clip against what I have existing. When I do a merge, when I do a merge onto the same parcel type, that's going to go and merge it in. That's going to create historic. What else? If I do a copy lines to, and I copy it to the same parcel type that it's coming from, that will also create historic. So thinking about it, those are the three elements, the three things, clips, merges, and then copy lines to where you're telling it what I had selected, it's no longer valid. I'm going to replace it by putting it on the same layer on top of it. Those three things will create historics. But just creating something on top of something else doesn't create historic. And you're just about two steps in front of me right now. All right, Garrett? All right.
Mark
So,
also has a question in the chat, if you don't mind.
okay.
What happens with the 223.57 feet versus the 223.47 feet near the top of Outlot 1? If you look up in the northeast corner of the sub, you can
Yep.
see a slight discrepancy in the length.
Well, it actually turns out that the 223.57 was from the north parcel. All right. And I'm going to show you something on there also as we go through. Got only a couple of minutes left in here. So there's a couple things you want to talk about. In here, it turns out that there were some issues in here because there was some elements in here that didn't quite match up. And I'm going to have to look to see, was I really careful when I did this, or there's 4803 when I did that adjustment, did that adjust to the right point here? I didn't check, and maybe I should have. Let's go back here and see what's going on. Let's go back to the align parcels on here. Ah, it looks like there was a difference between this before. So yeah, so it looks like that original data didn't have anything in there. So let's go and fix this. All right. So in this, there is the original data didn't have this little difference in here. And there's a couple ways for us to go and fix this. There's the easy way, there's the tougher way. Let me go and show you one of the ways to go and do this. Let's make sure we also have our text lines on here. All right. So one of my really one of the things I love on here is I'm going to fix this by using the align features tool. Align features tool. And I'm going to use the align features tool and I'm going to tell it, don't make me select anything, just align things here. All right. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and use the center point on here and I'm going to draw my alignment. And I'm going to tell it, I'm going to start here. I'm going to go here. Now I know that this alignment is supposed to be a radius of 116 feet. So I'm going to type R and I'm going to tell it 116.00 feet on here. By the way, I'm also going to tell it maybe 2 feet. Nope. Maybe 5 feet. I'm going to do more than that. 10 feet. All right. I want to make sure I get that in there. So I'm going to do that. I am not going to do alignment yet because there's an idiosyncrasy about using align features that when you're getting into what's commonly called a cusp of two elements, whether it's a cusp of a curve. When, for example, a curve comes here and then maybe it curves back this way, this is called a cusp, C-U-S-P. You get the same thing when you get a curve and a straight line. If I were to go and do this alignment now, it would take this line and move it over onto here and fit within this tolerance. So this line would actually come in here and then do this. This is one of those things when you start using aligned features, you realize that, oh, there's it's not simple. There is something you need to do here. So let's go and do this again. Let's go in here. Let's go to here. Let's go and use type R and actually put in 116.00 feet. All right. And then I want to continue until it snap to there. And I'm going to be really careful. I'm going to be belt and suspenders. I'm going to go all the way up to here. And what align features is going to do is it's going to take any vertices, any points, any vertices inside of my tolerance and snap them over so that they're coincident with the path that I just drew. One more thing, and I probably should turn this off and redo this path just to make sure that I'm not creating any issues here, or having it delete something in here. R 116.00. Okay, finish to here, then go to here. All right, go ahead and do that. And I'm going to go, and you'll note it went and modified those elements underneath there that it had turned on and made them fit this new element. That's another tip, one of the greatest tools inside of Pro on here for that. By the way, now that I go back here and turned on my tax parcels, now you can see, Mark, that this 223.57 is actually for this tax parcel, and this 223.49 is actually reflective of a lot inside of this subdivision on here. All right, so there is a difference, and it's allowed to be a difference. And the way the labels are set up, the labels are set up so that they're going to go show you what's inside of the polygon now on here. I also have my subdivision polygon turn on. That's what that 620.39 is. All right. So what I've done is I've gone and done this. I haven't created anything historic yet. Instead, let's go and do a couple things. Let's turn off that. Let's go and select our one subdivision. This is CSM. This is that name of one that was created 417. That's the one I created. So let's only select that one on here. And I'm going to go and clip everything underneath there. Now, again, remember me saying there's only a couple things that will create historic. One is a clip, one is a merge, one is a copy lines to, and also thinking about it, there's some divides if you divide a polygon. But while you have an active record, it will go and do that. All right, so now we go ahead and do a clip, and we're going to tell it to clip against, and in this case, we're going to tell it everything that's underneath here, so that if our tax parcels are turned on, it will clip the tax parcels. If our encumbrances are turned on, it will clip those. Our conveyance division, we don't want it to clip our lots. Our SimCons, clip that SimCon. Yeah, that's fine. There's also PLSS here. We don't want to do that, so that's turned off. We're going to tell it to clip that. It will now go and clip out all of those underneath here. Let's turn on our conveyance division now. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go and finally take our lots and we're going to duplicate them up onto our tax parcels. So there's our 4 different lots. We could have done this just as easily by going and saying, go ahead and select our polygons from here. And all we'd have then is the SimCon that we want to unselect. So there's our 4 lots. And what we're going to do is we're going to duplicate them. We're going to take them and move them onto our tax parcels. All right. Move them onto our tax parcels. And then, so we now have four here. Now we're going to go and correct and actually put in the attributes for that name field. So we're coming up at the end here of this. Just to let you know, here's the things that we've done. The other things we've done is maybe we go and check for any gaps or overlaps using our highlight gaps and overlaps on here. Let's go ahead and tell it that we want to highlight everything in here and say, go ahead and check for gaps and overlaps. It turns out, oh, there's actually a gap here that we're going to go and fix. Not going to do it now in this session. We'll look at this some other time. All right. So there's gaps and overlaps on here. That's something I recommend. Hopefully you picked up some of those tips, some of those tricks that we use when we're going and doing this on here. Hopefully it'll help you become more proficient in using the parcel fabric. These are little things that because we use this every single day, we know how to use this, how to become efficient in what we're doing. Hopefully you enjoyed this. And again, send us some recommendations for new topics in here. See you next time.